late cancellation yesterday. We had some scheduling problems, but it's late August, so it's we try to do a show every day, but it's also also the fact that there has to be news to talk about. We have Kevin Allen here today, but we're going to start with some pre-show stuff about the NFL, Russ, and a certain colorful wide receiver.
Yeah, let's talk about Antonio Brown. So this week's Hard Knocks, which I haven't fully gotten through yet, it starts off showing him coming into camp and Gruden saying, I like that he stands for his principles, which I didn't buy. And it's interesting because in that little press conference, Brown said, yeah, it's been a struggle and we're working with the league and blah, blah, blah. But he said that he would eventually put on a helmet and play, right? Mm-hmm. Now, this is taped like a week ago.
Right.
We now know that he's filed a second grievance the last couple of days. So I'm watching this, and he's talking about himself in the third person, and there is just nothing likable about this guy. What's actually funny is I didn't really know Antonio Brown other than seeing him in games and watching him run out the field and being a really good player. Now that I've seen his act up close and have listened to him more than I probably care to, he just seems like another self-centered, egotistical athlete that is killing his career and maybe putting a cloud on the entire team. No one's really saying it, but I got to tell you, if this thing keeps dragging on, it's their biggest story. And the Raiders actually need to play good football, not have a guy worried about what helmet he's going to use and if he's going to trade a autographed helmet of his own for that helmet if somebody happens to own one of these. Like, why would you want to use a 10-year-old helmet? The science tells you that's a bad thing to do anyhow because the air in it gets bad. Like, none of it makes sense.
Kevin, this kind of thing is one of the things that has turned me off about the NFL recently. Are these sort of games that players play, but this is not unusual. I can remember back in the day during the late 80s and early 90s during the Super Bowl years where Bruce Smith on purpose would have his corrective knee surgery in the first week of camp. He'd be out 4 weeks. He would purposely want to miss camp. Now, this is back in the day when they were playing in 95-degree weather. I think they were playing in Fredonia back then, in southern New York, and it was 2-a-days, and it was just really, today's camps are a picnic compared to that. But he did that. He avoided camp. And I get the feeling that this is what Antonio Brown is doing. He just doesn't want to be at camp. And he's just doing this to avoid having to be at camp. But it is a spectacle, and it's sort of embarrassing.
Yeah, it is. And let me just take this just in a different place, simply because I've actually been sort of thinking about this just recently about, and I know we had talked about it before when Jim Bouton passed away, that he had written the book Ball 4 in 1970, I believe. Mm-hmm. And I was a teenager, and that was the first book that allowed us to peek behind the curtain and see what really happens in the dugout, on the team bus, on the airplane, in the player hotels. And back then it was so revolutionary that you couldn't put the book down. Everybody was talking about it. And slowly over time, we've now been able to pull back the curtain. And we have several shows that sort of give us a look at what's going on, including Hard Knocks. And as this has been on recently, I've noticed, like as a journalist, I should really like those shows because, that gives us a look. And for the fan, that's exactly what we're trying to do as writers, is to get sort of an understanding of the full program, like what's going on, to keep everybody accountable. Make sure that you have as much access as possible. Well, you can't get better access than that, than being able to see Antonio Brown behave the way he has. But you know what? I found that I've grown weary of it.
Yes.
And I'm sort of embarrassed by that.
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed that I've grown weary of looking. And when I see these athletes, especially in this situation, like we talked about coming into the show about, it doesn't make Brown look good. It really doesn't. And all that's going on. What's your take on it? Have you, to me, the novelty is worn off, and I just don't enjoy them probably as much as I should.
I think part of it, which is might sound kind of weird, is there's that fourth wall that,
right.
that you don't, that I go back to being a kid, like being a sports fan as a kid, and what kids think of this when they see it, like that to me is like, like kids like have put athletes on a certain kind of pedestal, that they are a different, that they're, that they just look up to them. They think they're the greatest thing ever. They buy, they wear their jerseys around. We all as kids, like I made a Bernie Parent jersey out of a t-shirt when I was a kid. I didn't know what Bernie Parent was doing behind the scenes. I didn't know what was happening, whatever. And there's not that there's anything salacious about Bernie Parent, but I'm just saying that I didn't know. And it bothers me, I think, as a reporter or even just as a person, who like looks out there and still sees kids at games. I see the way they look to these guys and the way these guys are reacting as like, that's not becoming of kind of like and it sounds ridiculous, but like the role model type aspect, or just the thing that you just want these kids to, we want our athletes to be beyond this like stupid stuff like this, I think.
Well, Ak, you've made the point about 24/7 that the first one was real because it was the first time they did it, and then after they realized all this stuff like Bruce Boudreau swearing was going to be on, they sort of
Yeah, and I've said that many times. I really think that's true, and I think that
modified.
That very first before when 24/7, the first time we saw hockey 24/7 on HBO, it was crazy interesting because these guys didn't know what was going to go on the air.
Right.
And then when they we're filming everything, but they'll never put that on the air. You can see them thinking that way, and they did. But now I think another part of me and Kevin, you also, I think that from the journalist's point of view, we also know that even though we're seeing behind the scenes, we are still seeing someone's interpretation of behind the scenes.
So we're also seeing they know the cameras are rolling.
Right. They know the cameras are rolling. They know what they're going to look like, and we're all and there's an edit going on here. That someone is making that decision. And with the NFL, especially, we talked about this before, I think too, is that, there's no question that, the company that's doing this with the NFL or the company that does with the NHL, they have total freedom, so to speak. But they also know that if they do something that could they could just not have another season of it very quickly.
Well, and the truth is not coming out all the time, because if John Gruden is trying to sell that Nathan Peterman is actually a good quarterback, that there's lying going on.
But here's
the guy's the worst quarterback in the history of football,
and he did talk about him again. He is pushing Peterman too hard. But end of the day, for all that went on last year with the Steelers and Antonio Brown, for what the viewer sees, the viewer is siding with the Steelers,
right,
and saying that the Raiders made a mistake. And the problem is the Raiders gave Brown a $30 million signing bonus, I believe. Mm-hmm. And so they have to sort of get something out of this guy. And Brown has already made it clear he's made enough money, like he doesn't care. And he is ruining his image. Like if he doesn't care about his image for anything else in the future, he's doing a good job.
Now, this is something I think we can maybe take from that to the NHL here, because the NHL has guaranteed contracts and the NFL does not. But you've seen what's going on with Julio Jones in Atlanta, Ezekiel Elliott in Dallas, where they're on. Julio Jones is on, I think his second contract, and now he's looking to get more money, be one of the highest paid wide receivers. Ezekiel Elliott is on his first contract after being drafted in the top 5, and he's already asking for a renegotiation of his contract because the window for NFL running backs is so short. I'm wondering, and I know that this is not possible right now with the current CBA, but I think we're seeing it in part with what's going on with the RFAs right now. But how soon is it going to be before like a player like, and I'm just using Jack Hughes as an example. Jack Hughes has a 90-point season as a first-year player with the New Jersey Devils, and all of a sudden he says, I want my contract renegotiated. It does spread to other sports, and I think I hope it doesn't, because that's one of the things about the NHL that I like is it's not like basketball and it's not like football, but things have a way of changing and moving to other sports, and I'm concerned about that when it comes to hockey.
Yeah, I don't think it'll happen. I think the CBA, kind of protects it. And, one of the reasons why, and I'd be interested to get your guys' take on this. But one of the reasons why the NFL can get away with things like non-guaranteed contracts is it's a unique sport in that in every other sport, you non-stars can sort of still prove their value. In hockey, we understand that what a grinder can do in the postseason, and in baseball, the super utility man is well established. Everyone understands that. We know the value of long relievers, short relievers, and so forth. In basketball, the hierarchy there is established, but people who come off the bench are also recognized for their value. In football, we have a strategy, at least in my opinion, where there's 25 guys that you would love to have, and then everybody else it sort of fits in, and they're interchangeable. So because of that, it allows them to get away with things like, and that's why the career expectancy of a player is so long. You got to make your money quick in the NFL because you can be there long. Well, that doesn't exist in other sports. The other sports, the three major sports, you can establish your value even if you aren't a superstar, and people want to have you around because they understand your value. I don't think that's as true in the NFL.
No,
I'll tell you the only reason I'm not worried as well is because even the NFL changed the way they did things. For a while, they were slotting in players for where they were drafted with salary structure, and that turned out to be abysmal. It turned out to be like guys that were getting picked in like the top 5 that were getting these huge contracts, like they were already veterans, were turning out to be busts. And so they did away with that. And I think even they learned their lesson on that. So like you'll have the occasional Ezekiel Elliott, but in the end, he is going to lose. Jerry Jones is going to win, and Ezekiel Elliott is going to lose. Because no matter what, he's losing time on the field, he's losing money, and even if he doesn't lose it this year, it may cost him at the end of his career because he's not there now. And guys don't see it, but that's the way it works out, especially in the NFL.
It's the Le'Veon Bell playbook, is what everybody.
There you go.
Yeah, but at least was an established guy.
Sure.
Let's get started here, guys.
Go ahead, Ed.
Let's get started into our show. Ready?
Yeah, if we don't start hockey pretty soon, I'm going to sign with a podcast.
Yeah, I know. I'm with you. I got lots to talk about here. So here we go. Ready?
Yeah.
Hello, Hockey World. It is Wednesday, August 21st, 2019.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Kevin
I
Allen.
am Eklund. You're watching Hockey. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm Kevin Allen, but he is
Eklund. I'm sorry. And that is Kevin Allen, the great sports writer from USA Today, up there in your upper right corner. And I am Eklund, and you're watching the HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday at this time to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And a couple things, a lot of little interesting stories today that I found, which is hard. You're normally August. I'm like, oh, what are we going to find to talk about? But I found a lot of little things today. First off, I wanted to start off with George LaRock out yesterday, actually, tweeting out last night that he hears that Derick Brassard is going to sign a 1-year deal with the Edmonton Oilers. This is not official yet, and by any stretch of the imagination, but it could be very soon. But I got to thinking about Derick Brassard and not the fall of Derick Brassard, but to a degree the fall of Derick Brassard in terms of it felt like this guy, continually has not worked out in so many places, and yet he's such a good player. And is it just the salary issues haven't worked out in different places? Or
no, I'll tell you what it is. I followed him for a long time. He's a gret guy, right? So teams like him because he's good in the locker room and he does have a high skill level. He has never just lived up. He's never lived up to what everybody thought his skill level would be and his point level would be. 1 year with the Rangers, he had a really good point level. That was his career high, and since then, it's just been okay, like an average NHLer. And there's been a lot more expected of him. And now the problem is he was never the fastest skater. So now when you bring him on in a faster league, you got that to deal with too.
Yeah, what are your thoughts, Kev?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It really isn't money; it's the performance level. The romance with his ability, doesn't meet up with his production level. He did have a run in the playoffs with the Rangers that everyone remembers, and you know, they'd like to see him repeat that, and they figure, well, if we can get him the right, you know, this is what you say to yourself if you're trying to pick him up, you know, if we can get him back in the right circumstance, maybe we can duplicate that. But he's had several opportunities and not been able to, you know, to match that level of performance he had with that Rangers in that one playoff.
Now we don't know what the amount is.
And it's a situation that, you know, go ahead, Mike.
We don't know what the amount is, but clearly what this move is to either have Draisaitl or Nugent Hopkins play on the wing instead of one of them being third line center and having Brassard be the third line center. And that's a smart move by Ken Holland, because I think you sort of waste one of those two players playing limited minutes, and one of them plays with McDavid, and you have a combo that will work. But I mean, Brassard, if the funny thing is, since he was with Ottawa and all the places, the stops in between, I think it was Pittsburgh, Florida, Colorado, he's essentially been you know, the stopgap third line or second line center, and that's simply what he's doing with Edmonton.
Yeah, I mean, it is a kind of a sneaky little move by Ken Holland. We don't know what the contract is yet or anything like that, but you know, adding another skilled scorer to that lineup is, but with potential, you know, is you know, that could work out in certain situations. Playing with skilled players at that level, I mean, some players play better with skilled players, right? So we'll see what happens with Brassard. I mean, he did play with skilled players, obviously, in Pittsburgh.
I mean, he's never had more than 60 points in a season, which is really hard to believe, but it's true.
But yet, that's not terrible.
Let's go around the horn and say whether or not we think this will work out. I'll start, and I'll say no.
Say no.
No, it's not.
No, but I think it's more symptomatic of Edmonton than it is of Brassard, because I still think Edmonton is one of the biggest train wrecks in the league. I know Act disagrees, but I still believe that.
I don't disagree that they're going to get train wrecks in the league, but I think they were. I think Holland's going to fix that pretty quickly.
Well, it's going to take him time. He's not Superman.
He's not Superman, but I think that there's a lot more potential, and I think they are one of those teams that is lying in waiting. Like, they could absolutely explode at some point. They could really become a team that's very, very dangerous.
I agree with that, Mike. Just in saying that, you know, Holland didn't take over the bottomed out Toronto Maple Leafs. He took over a team that has Connor McDavid and
right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an incredible, you know, starting.
You're going to start somewhere.
Yeah, they have 4 or 5 guys that are you know, guys you would want on any team. So
right. No, and like I said, I have all the respect in the world. I have all this respect in the world for Ken Holland as a manager, and I'm sure he can get things turned around. I just don't think it can be in the span of 4 or 5 months. They've made a few moves that I think have been decent, but I still think that the ingredients of a team that is disappointed over the last few years are still there, and they have to sort of be filtered out before that team can really thrive.
I think the problem here is that Holland, if he puts a rookie in that spot, then the fans sort of get, you know, they murmur about it, like, this is the best we can do. And so if you get a guy like Brassard, he's a name. Look, 0.57 points per game. That's what this guy has averaged in his career. It's underwhelming. So he's probably going to get 10 or 12 goals. And in this era, 10 or 12 goals from a 3C isn't great. But you know what? That's probably what they're going to do, and sign on with that. Because otherwise they've got to sell a rookie. And remember, Holland, although he knows he has retooling to do, can't say that we're not going to make the playoffs when you have Connor McDavid on the team. So that's the balancing act. Yeah,
and you know, the one move that he's made that I think dramatically alters the team was the Lucic move.
Yes.
Because you know, everybody talked about it all the time, which made it a distraction. Plus, when he was on the ice, it was like they were playing a man short in terms of, you know, his ability to keep up with the modern game. And you know, James Neal, like, as disastrous as he looked in Calgary, and he did, like, he looked lost and you know, like he had totally lost it. But you know, he's been a scorer everywhere he's been. If he's playing with one of those two players that we just mentioned, then it's possible, maybe even probable, that he scores 20 to 25 goals this season.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that what you have to look at here, and to kind of finish your thought on is this going to work out or not, my answer would be it depends on what obviously they sign him for, but honestly, this probably is a risk worth taking, whether it works out or not. Like I think that whether or not this works out, whether Brassard can, just like Neil, this is maybe more so because it probably won't be very much.
Well,
is worth trying.
I find the dynamic of the Battle of Alberta really interesting this year, especially with the fact that they made a trade with each other, which is unheard of. But then they've also in a way swapped goaltenders because Mike Smith is with Edmonton and Cam Talbot is with Calgary. So that's going to be pretty interesting. I mean, that dynamic has always been interesting, but I think that just makes it more interesting.
Oh, I agree. And I think the difference between those two teams is, last year obviously was great, Calgary being the top team in the Western Conference, which people don't really remember. It's kind of, but they were the top seed in the Western Conference,
But Kevin, am I wrong? Calgary was always looked upon as flawed last year because nobody had confidence in their goaltending going into the playoffs. And then it was, even though Mike Smith played well against Colorado, it was proven true. They didn't have the goaltending that stood up when they needed to win.
Well, I think that's fair. I mean, I think everyone was waiting for them to come back to earth. They never really did in the regular season. They were, pretty consistent. But, in the playoffs, the problem with the playoffs is I always tell, my readers, don't read your team by what happens in the playoffs. We want to do that because that's how we measure a team, is success in the playoffs. But we all know, those of us who have covered it, that so much luck is involved in the postseason. It's health, and did your goalie, was he hot? Was he not? What injuries do you have? It's just it's so hard sometimes. I think. I mean, look at the Tampa Bay Lightning last year. Should we believe that team can't win? Well, of course not. Right. I mean, that team certainly can win, but they didn't win last year. So the same thing I would say that about Calgary. Calgary proved during the regular season that it has a lot of potential. Yeah. And did they need to make moves? For sure. I probably beat the drum louder than most about their goaltending because I still don't like what they've done with their goaltending. Mm-hmm. I would have gone out and tried to get a major goalkeeper, but that's what they've decided to do.
Yeah, they went that way. I wanted to talk a little bit about Russ.
You broke up there.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Is that better?
You broke up back.
Okay, I'm going to start. I wanted to discuss Russ Conway, the hockey writer who passed away. Okay. Who I'm sure Kevin knew very well. And for people who don't know about him, a little bit about him, he was a not many hockey writers are Pulitzer Prize finalists, put it that way. And he actually exposed a lot of the corruption in the NHLPA involving Alan Eagleson, and he was a longtime Bruins beat writer. Kevin, what are your memories and thoughts of him?
Well, that's exactly it. Like in my career, he broke the most important story, or the biggest story, the most impactful story, and that is of the the corruption of Alan Eagleson. He toppled Alan Eagleson, and Russ Conway was able, through his relationship with some older players, to earn their trust, including some superstar players. And they fed him all of the information, told him where to look, pointed out the rocks that need to be turned over. And Conway, being a terrific reporter, went out and did that. And, he wasn't at the Boston Globe. Usually you think about these, big stories and read major papers. But, he wasn't. He was at a smaller paper, but that didn't matter. He was a good reporter. He got in the Hall of Fame, honored him with the Elmer Ferguson just for that one body of work, which is and this wasn't like one story. This was a lengthy period of time where he basically unfolded and connected all the dots and showed kind of what had been going on in the Players Association under the Alan Eagleson regime. And of course, it led to Alan Eagleson receiving a prison sentence, and it sort of changed the approach. After that, we ended up with Bob Goodenow, and the Player Association became much stronger. They were a far greater force, more antagonistic than the Alan Eagleson Player Association. So Russ Conway is certainly one of the most important hockey journalists of the last 50 years.
Yeah, I agree. And sports journalists, I think, in a lot of ways, because in players' associations, I mean, that was one of the first real big players' association things that I can remember, at least, where you had any players' association be questioned as to what they were. And in Eagleson's case, a lot of the players didn't know how much. I was a little young, but if I remember this right, he was more in bed with the NHL really than he should have been. Correct?
Yeah. I mean, that was his biggest problem is he was friends, with so many of the people, but it went beyond that. There was money and the way that was handled and so forth, and just didn't have the separation of church and state that you really need. After that, certainly we have never had that problem. There's clear separation, and because of that, we've seen player salaries grow and become more commensurate with their. Let's face it, the players are the game. They're the product. They're the reason that it exists. So, we can argue about the importance of the salary cap, but clearly the Players Association has played a role to making sure that players have gotten their fair share. I mean, we have $10 million players. Now. I mean,
we have them again. It's interesting how we had him a while ago. We had him like Pavel Bure. I remember $10 million, and now we were like, when are we going to get back to $10 million? We got back to $10 million. Here we are. All right, I want to touch on wanted to get to the Mitch Marner stuff too, and I don't want to spend a ton of time on it because we do spend so much time on Marner. There's a couple other things to talk about, but I want to. So this is according to a European source, and this all feels a little bit manipulative to me. But anyway, I'm going to just throw it out there. That's my initial thought over the whole thing. Mm-hmm. The Mitch Marner's camp has contacted the Zurich Lions of the Swiss Hockey League. Apparently, that's been Mitch Marner's lifelong dream to play for the Zurich Lions.
Wow.
And he's always wanted, and who can blame him? Growing up in Toronto, most kids dream about playing for the Zurich Lions. So this is it's just these kind of things always happen this time of year, and it feels very leaked manipulatively, in my opinion. But what are our thoughts? Is this, Kevin? Let me go to you. What are your thoughts on this kind of thing?
Well, pardon me while I yawn.
Yeah.
I certainly understand why they do it. You're just trying to exert any kind of pressure you can at this point, but. He doesn't want to play in Switzerland. Switzerland's a great country, and if you have to go somewhere and play in Europe, why not Switzerland? Beer and chocolate are excellent.
They play 2 days a week.
Yeah, and a lot of the player of the game in Davos. I went over there during the lockout and covered that. They give them pillows, and so you get bottles of booze and some things. And it's just a real fun place to play.
It is
for about 3 weeks, Yeah. And
exactly.
Then you want to get back to crowds of 20,000 and playing against the best players in the world. So I understand why he's doing it. I don't think this is realistic. I don't think he has any desire to play there. I don't think, no matter how long he talked to Austin Matthews about how much fun Austin had, Austin couldn't come in the NHL at that point. He had
I did interview Matthews about it. He really did like the atmosphere because of the way the fans were crazy. And so there was, as a player, he really did like it. I want to call the Zurich Lions, though, the Cowardly Lions, because this tweet yesterday.
No. Oh, okay.
What? That's not a real tweet?
No, it's a real tweet. I think the Zurich Lions undercut the leverage that the Marner camp were trying to use by saying, well, we're going to go over to Switzerland.
Well,
they didn't admit to anything.
I don't know if they did that, but I'm going to call them the Cowardly Lions because they tweeted something that said nothing and basically tagged Marner and then put a hashtag with the Lions and the Leafs. and they basically said the Lions have been asked by the European agent if Mitch Marner can participate in our practice. Whether and when the player will train with Zurich is not decided yet. So it's like, then don't tweet anything. Why did they tweet it all?
Because
they for doing it.
Because they were probably getting a lot of inquiries, Russ, from everybody.
It doesn't matter, but nobody. We don't know about that. The fans don't know about that. That is a terrible tweet to put out there. It really is.
Well, I wrote about this yesterday, Eck, and we know that over the last few weeks that there have been sort of leaks out there coming through different articles regarding parameters on contract offers. None of them are favorable to the Marner camp. None. Because if you say, well, the Marner camp is looking for $10 million on a 3-year deal, then he looks unreasonable. And then the Leafs, supposedly the Leafs have offered him 10 and a half on a 6 or 7 year deal. None of these figures hold the Marner camp in any kind of good light. So I think this was a leverage play saying, okay, well, you're leaking this stuff out. We're going to leak the fact that we're going to go to Europe. And following sort of the William Nylander playbook, who practiced in Europe last year when he was having his contract impasse. To me, this shows one thing. If you didn't think that the offer sheet threat wasn't dead, it's officially DOA, because he would not leak this, or they would not leak this or do this if there was even a possibility of an offer sheet. They have no leverage from another team in the NHL in terms of making them an offer sheet. So they're going the route of, we're going to go to Europe. And if it was going to Europe, if he was going there to make money, he would leak going to a KHL team. You're not going to make big money in Switzerland. This is basically a leverage play. That's all it is.
Well, this is, Darren Ferris, who is the agent for Marner, right?
Yes.
This isn't out of a playbook thing. I mean, we saw that this is part of his playbook, right? This is Athens and
I don't know. They said it's the European agent. I don't think it's Ferris at all.
I don't know.
Well, I think it's.
It would depend. I mean, they're working. No matter. You don't think the European agent and Ferris are in cahoots here a little bit? I mean, you've got.
You don't have separate agents for
Europe.
No,
but they are quoting the European agent rather than.
Yeah, but it's because Ferris called the guy and said,
exactly. And because Ferris doesn't want to look like that. Ferris doesn't want to be known as the agent who threatens to take his players to Europe. But honestly, he's done that with the guy in Boston too. Wasn't he also his agent?
No, his two were Athanasiou and Josh Anderson. And I don't know, Abby, we would know if there was any threat of going to Europe with Athanasiou. I don't remember it. All I know is that
for sure it was.
That seemed to be real. I mean, it seemed to get closed, right?
Yeah, the threat came early in that. Yeah, I mean, look, everybody understands what this is. No, the Maple Leafs certainly didn't look at this and say, "Wow, this is worrisome." Same thing when Anthony Ciu, did that with the Red Wings. That was just greeted with, yawns. Okay, we get it. That's where we'll go if it doesn't work out. But ultimately, you got to believe it is going to work out because they need him, and he doesn't want to play. He wants to be in the NHL. So, at some point it'll work out. But I don't see this as any major story. I think this is just part of the gymnastics of negotiating that is now part of, as Eck called it, the playbook.
Yeah, and what we do. So yeah, and I really, the thing I wanted to ask you, Kevin, real quick, I've talked about this before, but not when you're on the air, because this really is the thing that fascinates me about this whole offer sheet crap that we've talked about before. And, obviously we've dealt with it a long time. And I don't agree that this has anything to do with offer sheets, Mike. I think that this is just completely, I think this is just its own separate thing. But the way the offer sheet thing is playing out, this, and I'm going to use my analogy again quickly about a relationship, okay? Because I have a girl I want to, let me do this. Let me just do this real fast. I'll do it real fast because I want Kevin's opinion on it because I think he'll get it. I have a girl that wants me to ask her to marry her. Okay. She's got a lot of things, like she wants me to do this, and she wants me to never watch TV. She's got demands on me, but I really love her. She's the only girl I'm going to ask to marry. But I'll only marry her if she can find another guy who will meet those demands. If she finds somebody else who meets those demands, if you can get John over there to meet all your demands, sure, I will propose to you immediately and give you all your demands.
Yeah. Well, I mean that is what has. I mean, I think the one thing I will say that this summer has given us is the clear. I often explain, why these don't work, offer sheets.
Yeah.
And I go into kind of a convoluted, reasons why they don't work, the impact it has on your team, and blah 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 blah, and the consternation that goes into them. But Kenny Holland and a couple other GMs have now just boiled it down simply to the reason we don't do them is because they don't work. And that's simple. And it doesn't matter. It's this the CBA is not set up to allow these to have any practical application in the marketplace.
Yeah,
the
it's
only
terrible.
time that it works is if you have a player where there is debate about whether he's good or he's not.
Right.
Otherwise, they can't work, because in order to get them, as I've said before, not to match, you have to make the contract so onerous that it will crush you as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's, that's why,
Yeah.
it won't ever work unless you're going to change it in the next CBA, which I don't predict will happen.
And the Ferris playbook, as I call it, that he followed with Athanassiou and Josh Anderson, didn't work, because Athanassiou in the end got a 1-year deal for, I think it was $1.3 million, and had to have another good year to get the money he deserved. And Josh Anderson, after holding out for the entire training camp, got a 3-year deal at about 1.8, which I'm sure that was not what the goal was to get 1.8 million for 3 years for a guy who's turned into one of the better young power forwards in the NHL. So the playbook hasn't worked. It might work with Marner, because Marner is a star player, and the Leafs don't want to go through the same thing as they went with Nylander last year. But Kyle Dubas can't succumb to this time around. He surrendered on Nylander. He gave Matthews money that was consistent with an 8-year deal on a 5-year deal. Marner's in a bad place at the worst time, because if they do that, then they're probably not going to be able to afford to sign any of the defensemen that they brought in, or they might have to trade William Nylander. So Marner is going to have to take a little less, or that there's going to be a divorce here. That's that's what's going to happen.
I mean, the greatest leverage that Marner has, just leaving aside all this other nonsense of offer sheets or going to Switzerland, is the fact that he is a superstar and the Maple Leafs really can't afford to alienate him. Like, the longer this goes on, all he has to do is sit home. And if this doesn't work out, as the calendar clicks along, he gets madder. And, you don't want, and a divorce is a good word for it. You don't want a player to be mad about how you treat him. That's the leverage he has.
Right.
Yeah. No, that is what you have to look at right now, and that is starting to, I hear annoy, and obviously people are going to get more annoyed as it gets closer to the deadline. Like, it's just what happens. You can't get by it. The Leafs have done a lot to make.
Well, let me ask Kevin this, getting away from Marner specifically and more towards the other all these free agents, because I can't remember who I was listening to yesterday, but their speculation was around Labor Day, you're going to start seeing some of these guys drop off and signings will begin to happen. Do you believe that that's the case, or do you think it's going to last into training camp and maybe into the regular season with a number of them?
Well, I don't think a number of them, but I think it's possible with a couple of them. Because teams are trying to hold the line. The salary cap squeeze that's happened, for these teams is real. And, I see people making comments like, how do you get in the position where, a change in the salary cap by $1 million can cause such upheaval? Well, it's because everybody's playing it so close to the margins that, that's why all that happens. So I think that most of them will sign, but I do think it's possible that, Marner will stretch in, and this is total speculation, but, Kachuk, who knows? But there'll be, I think there will be a couple that'll go into the season, but I don't expect that we're going to see, players in late November, still not signed.
Right.
I think this is going to get on there. Everybody wants to play, and they want to play in the NHL. So, at some point, someone says, the difference between my offer and your offer it's really only $1.5 million, and the government takes half in taxes, and my agent's going to take, 6%. And then they start to say, do I really want to do this for $400,000 a year? Now, that's not where they're at. There's a big difference between for example, in the Marner, but and when it comes down to it, often it's just, those kind of things. And then somebody starts to say, I'm just not going to fight over, $500,000. And
what do you think about this thing that Darren Dreger threw out there, that the possibility of Marner going to camp and paying his own insurance?
Never do it.
No,
I don't think he would, because the cost is so great. I mean, I used to talk to the late Jimmy Johansson about how hard it is to, pay the insurance. And I know Russia has paid literally millions to get Ovechkin to come and play in the World Championship. So, like, the cost would be, I would assume, would be enormous.
Yeah,
I would think so. Yeah, well, definitely. A couple of things real fast. I wanted to get off this topic, if we could, for a second. Because someone pointed this out to me, which I really thought was fun to discuss for a second. The fact that this current New Jersey Devils team may be the first team ever having 3 number 1 overalls on the same line. This is something that was thrown out there that they are
Heischer, Hall, and Hughes.
Yeah, Heischer, Hall, and Hughes are being discussed as a possible line.
Wow.
And that is I couldn't think of another situation where that's happened.
Owen Noel and Sundin were 2. I don't know if they had a third that was.
I'm sure Edmonton's had 2. I don't think this will be a line, no. I don't.
No, it doesn't make sense. You'd want to split those 2 guys up.
Yeah, I think Edmonton had Nugent Hopkins, Hall, and Yakupov at one point.
They may have.
Yeah, because Hall's a left. Hall's a left wing. Nugent Hopkins is a center, and Yakupov is a right wing. I'm sure they, at least on a power play, that line played together.
Yeah, I just think that could be fun.
But
that's a lot of pressure, a lot of high level guys. Russ, you had something that you wanted to get into here that was kind of
cool. So Jeremy Roenick's got a top 20 list of his NHL top 20 defensemen, and he left off Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Like, he's got Torrey Krug in there. And okay. I got to tell you, I can't find – I don't think we'll find an NHL GM short of Boston that would tell you that they would take Torrey Krug over Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Like, I just don't understand it.
Well, I'll give Jeremy a little bit of credit. He has Colton Parayko 20th, and the NHL Network fan poll had him 3rd. Colton Parayko isn't even the best defenseman on his team, let alone 3rd best in the NHL. And I'm not slagging him he's a good defenseman, but Alex Pietrangelo is the best defenseman on that team.
But when you're talking about like top 20, which is the greater percentage of the league, Oliver Ekman-Larsson's up there in the top defenseman in the league. He gets paid that way.
Yeah.
Plays that way. Like, you have to look at it. And again, we don't know the criteria, right? Because, he doesn't share it with us. But this is the problem, unfortunately, when you play in like Arizona. You do get forgotten, even if you're a great player.
Yeah, Jeremy
shouldn't be forgotten by Jeremy Roenick. Go ahead, Kev.
Yeah, Jeremy shouldn't forget Ekman-Larsson, because he's so connected to that franchise, and he lived there. He knows them well. I'm actually surprised on that. But I'll bring up what David McNabb told me in 1987. I've never forgotten that, when we were discussing about somebody's list and what was on it. He goes, what you always have to put in perspective, no matter what list you put out, there always has to be the best player that's not on that list.
Yeah,
and that's who we're always talking about. So,
but you give Ronan credit for like the journalistic aspect of like making something controversial on this list. He threw it throughout.
But I'll give you another one that are on the list that I think we probably would all agree with at this point. He's got John Klingberg 12 and McAvoy 13. Like, I don't think there's a universe, and I like John Klingberg, I do, but I don't think there's a universe where I think John Klingberg's better than Charlie McAvoy.
Yeah, and also, I mean, and don't get me wrong, I think he's a fantastic young defenseman, and if I was running a team, I'd love to have him on my team. But Miro Heiskanen's had 1 year, one.
Right.
Yeah.
and there are defensemen who have played well for 3 or 4 years. Like
there's a lot of guys on this list that Art Larson should be considered before.
The other issue on those lists, and I've had to do them too, and that it's complicated because do you factor in potential? Are we talking about is it a list to play a game next week, or is this a long-term list? That kind of thing always kind of plays in. Now, that doesn't explain Ekman Larson, but the McAvoy versus Klingberg, over the long term. But I'm not so sure. It depends on what you need. Klingberg's a heck of an offensive defenseman. So a lot of it's kind of hard to factor all that in if you're just talking about all around play, that sort of thing. So I always have a little bit of sympathy for list makers because sometimes it's hard to define the parameters.
Especially best. Like the
I'll
word best.
I'll give you one more bad one good one. I'll give you a good one first. I think John Carlson 8 is good because he may be the most underrated defenseman in the NHL because I've tried to tell people last year, besides the amount of points he got, he was either second or third in shot blocking. Like this is John Carlson's got the red being an offensive defenseman, but he does a lot more. But here's the one where you can't just go by what you saw on the ice last year. You have to go by the player. I'm not taking Mark Giordano over Drew Doughty any day of the week, and he's got him ranked higher. Like, come on.
Wow.
Giordano, that's a career year. He had a great year. He's a really good defenseman. He is not better than Drew Doughty.
Right.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Russ. So
no. Okay, so I have one more thing here, and this is a really good article. I thought a fun article again, and kind of listy, but very good summer talk. Emily Kaplan from ESPN put out this article on the NHL's all-decade.
You broke up again.
Things happened at the end of a decade, but still going. She's still going into a little bit.
Yeah, broke up. So
these are the all-decade awards. I'm sorry. So this was put out by Emily Kaplan on ESPN.com, and so the Hart Trophy, the finalists. I was going to give you guys the finalists and have you guys pick the winner. Okay. So our finalists for the Hart Trophy are Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin, and Patrick Kane. It's the last 10 years.
Patrick Kane.
All right. Kevin.
That's a tough one.
Yep.
I'm gonna go Crosby.
Okay.
Russ, where are you?
He said Crosby.
Crosby is the winner for her. 922 points to Ovechkin's 901 points, but that's not really neither here nor there. But I do like that. Now, how about a Vezina trophy? Her finalists for the Vezina: Lundqvist, Bobrovsky, Price, and Rinne. She's got 4 finalists.
I mean, I'll go first. I see Lundqvist running away with this. I mean, Rinne's close. Price is close, but he had some injuries. I think Lundqvist runs away with it.
I think it would be Price. I wouldn't pick him, but I think it would be Price.
I'm a Lundqvist guy too. I just think his consistency, and I try not to be persuaded by the Rangers' lack of postseason success.
Yeah.
So.
But you guys will be right with Lundqvist. That is the winner, according to her.
I wouldn't have picked Price. I would have picked somebody else. But
he started more games in that period of time and faced more shots in that period of time than any other goalie.
Right.
He's among those goalies who have played at least 300 games. He's the second best save percentage at 919. But Price, Rinne, and Bobrovsky are like 918. So it's really, they're all really crazily tight.
Talk to me about Price because I was just looking him up for another show that I'm doing.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I got to run. I'm sorry.
Okay, Kev.
Kev. I want to say he started 64 games last year or 65 games.
Yeah.
Price did. Yeah, it was around
real bounce.
He played in 66 in total, and I think he started 64 or 5, which is amazing. I mean, for all
a real bounce back year last year. Big reason why the Canadians were in the running, the whole time.
It was a great year.
It's also one of the reasons they went out and got Keith Kincaid this year because I don't think they want him starting as many games.
Yeah.
Their backup was Antti Niemi, and Charlie Lindgren for a few games, and that might have been the difference between them making and missing the playoffs.
Right. All right. The Norris Trophy she has finalists would be Erik Karlsson, Duncan Keith, and Drew Doughty.
I would say Karlsson.
I'm going to say Karlsson's going to win this.
Yeah, she gives it to Karlsson. You guys are right there. Is there anybody else that should be on that list though in the last 10 years? I was trying to think.
Well, Shea Weber would be the one. I mean, if you didn't have injuries, you would have Shea Weber on the list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Selkie,
possibly Ron Hainsey.
Yeah, you're right. The Selkie of Bergeron, Kopitar, and Taves. Obviously, I think that everyone.
Wait, who's the first one? Bergeron,
Kopitar, and Taves.
Bergeron.
It's Bergeron.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's named the Bergeron Award at this point.
Yeah, the game Bergeron Trophy.
The best rookie season in the last decade. This is a good one. Like, if you would have called her, she has Barzal, Panarin, and Matthews.
40 goals in his rookie year.
I mean, all right. I'm going to say that Matthews is the winner. But, again, last year with Pettersson, if you go by how many games he played and his points and goals per game,
right,
it's probably more impressive than anybody on the list.
But the injury, the durability is a question, and the thing is,
all right. So hold on. Here's my argument.
Yeah,
it never was for Mario Lemieux. Like the argument always was for Mario Lemieux. Well, if he played more games, he'd have more points, and they always went with the points per game. Why are they not doing that with Pettersson?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a mitigating factor when you're talking about like an overall rating, but we're talking about a 1 year window because Matthews played all 82 games as a rookie and has been hurt the last 2 years. But that's why I would say Matthews. But who was it?
Well, I think I'm just going to say Pettersson to me is the most exciting rookie of the last decade in my mind.
Who? But
they gave it to
Barzal.
Yeah, Matthew Barzal. The 87 points in 85 games. She said that number is pretty impressive, for the Islanders in 2017-18. 85 games. I'm not quite sure what that means, but that's on this list here. I'm trying to figure out how that.
I mean, but you know what? Again, Pettersson, even injured, was 0.93 points per game. Like, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah, no, you're right. The Jack Adams, best goalie of the last decade. Barry Trotz, Joel Quenneville, and John Tortorella.
Quenneville.
And yeah, she went with Trotz.
Really?
That's horse crap.
I can't buy that.
No. Yeah. I mean, until the Capitals win, what was his reputation as a head coach? Great in the regular season, gets a team to play a great defensive style, and doesn't show up in the playoffs.
Yeah, counter argument to that would be, I think
he never got out of the second round with Nashville.
Counter argument would be those Predator teams. Some of those Predator teams probably weren't even playoff teams. And
who had more wins? Does Quenneville have more wins than Trotz?
It's a good question. I don't know. I have
Stanley Cups. Trotz.
No, I mean, but Quenneville had much better teams than Barry Trotz. I mean, like Barry Trotz, this award usually in general, if you think about the Jack Adams, usually goes to the overachieving, and I think Trotz has overachieved more than any other.
Overachiever, but I think honestly, if you took a poll around the league and asked who the better coach was, I think they're going to say Quenneville.
Yeah. I put the request for some questions in the chat, but let me just.
I think it's close, Zach. I do.
Yeah. Let me
go with Trotz, but I can see what you're saying.
Let me just touch on this one because it was announced yesterday. The 1 year signing of Valerie Nicheushkin by the Colorado Avalanche. And Russ, to me, this is like a complete no risk, no lose scenario because you sign him, and if he doesn't perform, then like you said, he probably goes back to Russia. And he hasn't played well, and that's an understatement, since the hip problem that he missed most of a year with, and then he's never really come back. He went to the KHL, came back, and had 0 goals and 0 penalty minutes in I think 60-some-odd games last year. But I'm still intrigued by the talent.
Sure, he's a big guy who skates. He's got a high skill level. If you watch him, you can see it's there. It's just not clicking. Now, I think a good situation, and I think this is well thought out by Colorado, is he could probably room with Zadorov.
Yeah, There's
That's
some Russians there. Yeah, that's true.
I think that's a huge point. It really is.
And that could help ease him into it right out of the get-go.
Yeah, I completely agree. That is a huge point. Any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, let's see. With Detroit back end needing young talent, could Yzerman pull a trade for an RFA defenseman, and who or what would that be? Well, I mean, their defense is terrible, the Red Wings. They struck out on Trouba, which is always the rumor where he was going to go since he was from Michigan.
Yeah.
They have 3 defensemen over the age of 33 and entering the final year of their contract: Green, Daly, and Jonathan Erickson. So they're going to clear a lot of cap space.
And they don't know if Cronwall wants to play or not. That's also there still.
Right, well, I don't know if Yzerman wants Cronwall back.
I know there's a lot. There's like from what I've heard, they're still leaving it up to Cronwall. So,
well, right. But I mean, that would be surprising because I would seriously doubt even if he comes back that he finishes the year. I mean, I know he probably comes back and on the guarantee that he doesn't get traded.
Yeah,
but that's the whole value of him. If he comes back, this team is a candidate for being 31st overall. Yzerman, I'm sure, is going to be renting a lot of these players at the deadline. Daly and Erickson and Green. If they're healthy at the deadline, teams will be looking to rent veteran defensemen and he'll get draft picks back. So if you bring back Cronwall, that's what you want to do with them.
All right.
Yeah.
So trade-wise, if Steve Yzerman is going to call up Jarmo Kekalainen and ask about Zach Werenski, it's going to cost him Dylan Larkin. So are you going to do that?
Yeah.
No.
I don't think so. No, I don't think. I think Dylan Larkin is their guy.
Right. But that's what I think it will cost them.
I mean,
that is what it would cost them.
There were rumors earlier in the summer about a Ristolainen for Anthony Mantha trade, and that would be dumb because Ristolainen's value is down right now, and Mantha's value is increasing, and I think Mantha is a few years younger. So, but if it was a Tyler Bertuzzi for a Ristolainen, then I would do it because Ristolainen's under contract for this year and 2 more years, and I think he's somebody who could definitely improve their top 4. But I just think, like I said, I think this is a rebuild year. I think this is
I think it's unlikely.
Yeah, I think this is a year where the Wings, they're not going to say we're tanking, but they're going to say, okay, they really didn't do much in free agency. They haven't made any major trades.
Right.
I think they're going to weed out their some of their young guys, give them opportunity, and try and clear out the veterans. And if they do that, then they're going to finish really low. Here's a good question from Matthew Gaffney. What do you guys think of the Canes' new away jerseys? These jerseys are a friggin' abomination.
I wish I wasn't asked this question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This goes, and I said this on Twitter, this goes at the same level as the Ottawa Sens jersey.
Mike does not like nicknames on jerseys.
Yeah, or the Tampa Bolts jersey. Your name is the Hurricanes. If you put the Hurricanes across there like the Rangers jerseys of old, I would say fine. It's not the greatest. It's not the worst. This is stupid.
I would say this. For a guy like me whose vision is still really good but not perfect, yes, I could see those big block letters clearly.
I don't usually like nicknames on jerseys. I don't. This is the first one I haven't totally hated. I'll just
yeah, of course.
No, because I'll tell you why.
It seems like you're picking out curtains with your wife. That's an answer you would give your wife.
Yeah, no, I mean, no, I'm
bad.
Obviously, I'm not a big fan of the kind of like, we are beyond, we have designs now, we have logos, we're beyond just having to put the names down the jerseys, and that was something that was done, in the 1930s for everybody. But I just think that, I know what the Hurricanes are trying to do here, like the whole concept of the Canes, which is something that they do go by, and it has a little bit of a Southern feel to it as well. To me, that actually works a little bit to like, okay, this is an SEC football area. This is like completely been there through all the crazy, before game stuff that they do outside with all the great barbecues and all that. It's the Canes. It has like a feel to me that does have some semblance of it fits for the area. They have the Caniac thing. They have a thing with this Canes. It's different than like it was said Habs, across or whatever for the Canadians or whatever like that. The Canes are actually a thing. And it actually does work in the South a little bit. I don't know why, but for me, I get it a little bit more than I've gotten the others.
All right, so here's what I just looked at. Because I thought they should redo the logo. And if you redo the logo, I looked at what the state colors are on the state flag for Carolina, and it's like a off blue. It's kind of like a denim-y color blue, and then a lot of red and some white. Why not put that in a new Hurricanes logo of a hurricane? And do that as I think that would draw in more people from Carolina.
I think this is worse than the Sabres 50th anniversary jersey because all they did was make the Buffalo gold.
The bear from the Bruins was just god awful.
But it is better than what Major League Baseball is doing this weekend with these stupid players weekends. Names on the back of jerseys that are not the names of the players, but like all rise for Aaron Judge.
Not true.
Stupid.
The nickname for Jacob DeGrom of the Mets is DeGrom. He didn't play along with that,
right? And the nickname for Brett Gardner is Gardner. So he's
But here's the other thing of this. We already had this with Tampa and the Bolts, and it was awful.
Terrible.
Don't we learn from our mistakes in this league?
Apparently.
Yeah, Tampa's a different thing, though. I don't know.
Oh, wait. So did you buy a Bolts jersey, Ek?
No, I hated that jersey. I told you that.
Yeah.
No, but the city of Tampa is more of a. Let's admit, Florida is a northeastern state in these places that's in the South. Like it's a different. It's not like when you go to North Carolina, when you go to Raleigh, and I've seen teams there, it's like you do feel like you're like in Nashville, you're in the South. You feel like you're in this. You have the southern feel. They are totally populated by people who used to live in New York and Boston.
Yeah.
So it's or Toronto, and even a lot of Ontario people are in Tampa and Miami. So it's like, to me, that is, it's different. Where the southern thing of like old school football type jerseys, Friday Night Lights feel type thing. I don't know if I'm explaining right, but that does make more sense in here.
No, I get what you're saying with that. I do.
Two more brief little notes here. Two signings. Michael Del Cole and Josh Hosang, both signed by the Islanders. Del Cole, 2-year deal, one-way contract, $700,000 AAV, so league minimum for Del Cole. Hosang accepts the qualifying offer, 2-way deal, 1 year, $875,000, $70,000 for the AHL contract. Russ, I think Hosang is never going to have success with the Islanders. I think he's going to be somebody who has to go to get someplace else to be able to have success in his career. So I think this is just delaying the inevitable.
I think this contract screams we are protecting an asset.
Right.
That's it. Not that he's going to get a big chance. Where Del Cole, you could see him getting slotted in the lineup at some point because he's become a role player and accepted a role in Trotz like that. They haven't given a role to Josh Hosang. To be fair to Josh Hosang, they haven't.
Yeah, they really haven't.
Yeah, I think his role is the lead Bridgeport in scoring.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. All right, guys. That is all the time we have. We appreciate you guys getting up early today with us. We'll be back again tomorrow. And remember, you can follow Kevin on Twitter. If you don't follow him at @ByKevinAllen, go there for sure. And we appreciate Kevin showing up. And I'll be back with a blog in about an hour and a half or so. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you tomorrow.